The forbidden knowledge, Chanakya died, protecting ancient secrets that control human behavior. Chanakya, what? If I told you that over 2,300 years ago, one man discovered the ultimate secrets of human psychology, secrets so powerful that they could make or break entire empires, secrets so dangerous that he took most of them to his grave because he knew they could be used to manipulate and control millions of people. That man was Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, the brilliant strategist who single-handedly destroyed the mighty Nanda Empire and established the Mauryan dynasty, making a simple boy named Chandragupta into one of history's greatest emperors. But here's what most people don't know. Chanakya didn't just use political strategy or military tactics. He used forbidden psychological techniques that gave him almost supernatural power over human behavior. Today I'm going to reveal the forbidden knowledge that Chanakya died protecting, the ancient secrets of human psychology that he coded into his writings but never fully explained because he knew they were too dangerous for the wrong hands. My name is your name, and for the past 15 years, I've been decoding ancient texts, studying behavioral psychology and reverse engineering, the techniques that history's greatest strategists used to control human behavior. What you're about to learn today isn't just historical information. These are real psychological principles that still work exactly the same way in the modern world because human nature hasn't changed in thousands of years. But before we go deeper, I need to give you a warning. These techniques are incredibly powerful, and they can be used for good or evil. The choice is yours, but remember that with great knowledge comes great responsibility. Chanakya understood something about human nature that most people never realize. He discovered that there are hidden psychological triggers built into every human being, triggers that, when activated, can make people do almost anything you want them to do. He called these triggers the 7 gates of human behavior, and he used them to build an empire that lasted for centuries. The first forbidden secret is what Chanakya called the fear anchor technique. He discovered that every single human being is controlled by one primary fear that dominates all their other fears. And if you can identify and trigger that primary fear, you can control their entire decision-making process. Here's how it works. According to Chanakya, there are 5 primary human fears: the fear of death, the fear of poverty, the fear of rejection, the fear of powerlessness, and the fear of meaninglessness. Most people have one fear that towers above all the others, like a giant controlling their entire life without them even realizing it. Chanakya would study his enemies and allies, carefully watching their behavior patterns, listening to their words, observing their body language, until he could identify their primary fear. Once he knew someone's primary fear, he could use it as an anchor to control their behavior by either threatening to trigger that fear or promising to protect them from it. For example, if someone's primary fear was poverty, Chanakya would either threaten their financial security to make them comply or promise them wealth and prosperity to gain their loyalty. If their primary fear was rejection, he would either threaten social exile or promise acceptance and status. The key insight that Chanakya discovered is that people will do almost anything to avoid their primary fear, even if it means acting against their own best interests in other areas. This is why people stay in toxic relationships, jobs, or situations that are clearly harmful, because leaving would trigger their primary fear. Modern research in behavioral psychology has confirmed exactly what Chanakya knew thousands of years ago, that fear-based decision-making bypasses rational thinking and creates predictable behavioral patterns. The second forbidden secret is the desire mirror technique. While fear controls what people want to avoid, desire controls what people want to pursue, and Chanakya discovered that there are 4 core human desires that drive all human behavior: the desire for security, the desire for significance, the desire for connection, and the desire for growth. But here's the secret that makes this technique so powerful. Chanakya realized that people don't actually want the thing, they think they want. They want the feeling they believe that thing will give them. For example, someone might say they want money, but what they really want is the feeling of security or significance that they believe money will provide. Someone might say they want a relationship, but what they really want is the feeling of connection or validation that they believe a relationship will give them. Chanakya used this insight to become a master manipulator by offering people not the thing they thought they wanted, but the deeper feeling they were really seeking. He would study what people desired, then show them how supporting his goals would give them the feeling they were truly seeking, even if it meant giving up the surface-level thing they thought they wanted. This technique is so powerful because it bypasses conscious resistance. When you offer someone their deepest desire at the emotional level, their rational mind stops analyzing and starts justifying why they should do what you want them to do. The third forbidden secret is what Chanakya called the identity hijack method. He discovered that every person has multiple identities living inside them: the parent, the child, the leader, the follower, the victim, the hero, the rebel, the conformist, and many others. Most people are not conscious of these different identities. They just react automatically based on which identity gets triggered in any given situation. Chanakya became a master at triggering specific identities in people to get them to behave in predictable ways. If he wanted someone to be compliant, he would trigger their child identity by speaking to them with parental authority. If he wanted someone to take risks, he would trigger their hero identity by framing the situation as an opportunity to save or protect others. If he wanted someone to rebel against his enemies, he would trigger their rebel identity by showing them how his enemies represented oppressive authority. The reason this technique is so effective is that when someone's identity gets triggered, they automatically adopt the behavioral patterns, emotions, and decision-making processes associated with that identity. You literally become a different person with different priorities, values, and behaviors. Chanakya understood that controlling someone's identity in the moment was the ultimate form of psychological influence, because identity determines everything else: thoughts, emotions, decisions, and actions. The fourth forbidden secret is the social proof cascade system. Chanakya discovered that humans are fundamentally herd animals who look to others for cues about how to think, feel, and behave, especially in uncertain situations. But he took this insight much deeper than just basic social proof. He learned how to create cascading social movements that would spread his influence exponentially. Here's how he did it. Chanakya would identify the key influencers in any group, the people that others naturally look to for guidance and leadership. He would focus all his attention on winning over these key influencers, using the other psychological techniques. Once he had the influencers on his side, he would have them demonstrate the behaviors and beliefs he wanted to spread to the broader group. Because people naturally copy the behaviors of those they respect and admire, the desired behaviors would spread through the group like a contagion without Chanakya having to directly influence each individual person. But here's the truly brilliant part. Chanakya would create multiple cascades, simultaneously working through different social networks and influencer groups. This created the impression that his ideas and agendas were emerging naturally from multiple independent sources, rather than being orchestrated by one person. This made people much more likely to adopt his viewpoints because they appeared to be spontaneous, popular movements rather than calculated manipulation. Modern social media and viral marketing operate on exactly the same principles that Chanakya discovered over 2,000 years ago. The fifth forbidden secret is the cognitive dissonance trap. Chanakya understood that when people's beliefs contradict their actions, or when they're presented with information that contradicts their existing beliefs, they experience psychological discomfort called cognitive dissonance. Most people resolve this discomfort by changing their beliefs to match their actions rather than changing their actions to match their beliefs. Chanakya weaponized this psychological mechanism by getting people to take small actions that contradicted their stated beliefs or loyalties. Once someone had acted in a way that contradicted their previous position, they would automatically start changing their beliefs to justify their actions rather than admitting they had made a mistake. For example, if Chanakya wanted to turn an enemy into an ally, he wouldn't try to convince them directly. Instead, he would find ways to get them to do small favors or take small actions that benefited his cause. Once they had helped him even in minor ways, their mind would start rationalizing why they had done so, which would gradually shift their entire perspective and loyalty. This technique is so effective because it works with human psychology rather than against it. People naturally want to see themselves as consistent and rational, so they will change their beliefs before they will admit to being inconsistent. Chanakya used this to turn enemies into allies, into devoted followers, and neutral parties into supporters, all without direct persuasion or coercion. The sixth forbidden secret is the scarcity and urgency matrix. Chanakya discovered that humans have an inherent tendency to want things more when they believe those things are scarce, or when they feel time pressure to act quickly. But he took this insight much deeper than simple scarcity marketing. He learned how to create artificial scarcity and urgency that would trigger automatic compliance. Here's the psychological mechanism behind this. When people believe something is scarce or that they have limited time to act, several things happen simultaneously. Their analytical thinking decreases, their emotional arousal increases, they start focusing on potential loss rather than potential gain, and they begin taking action based on instinct rather than careful consideration. Chanakya would create situations where people felt they had to choose quickly between limited options, and he would structure those options so that his preferred choice appeared to be the most attractive under time pressure. He would also use scarcity to increase the perceived value of his alliance, friendship, or support by making it seem like he was highly selective about who he worked with and that his attention and assistance were rare, precious resources. This made people compete for his favor and support rather than him having to chase them for cooperation. The modern applications of this principle are everywhere in sales, marketing, politics, and personal relationships. Anyone who understands how to create authentic scarcity and urgency has enormous psychological leverage over others. The seventh and most dangerous forbidden secret is what Chanakya called the reality distortion field. This is perhaps the most powerful and dangerous technique in his arsenal, because it involves literally changing someone's perception of reality itself. Chanakya discovered that human perception is much more flexible and malleable than most people realize, and that by controlling the information environment around someone, you can literally make them see, think, and believe almost anything. Here's how this works. The human brain doesn't perceive reality directly. Instead, it constructs a model of reality based on the information it receives from various sources. By controlling those information sources, you can control someone's reality model and therefore their entire worldview. Chanakya would surround his targets with carefully curated information sources, people who would reinforce his preferred narrative about events, situations, and other people. He would control not just what information they received, but also when and how they received it, the emotional context in which it was presented, and the social pressure associated with accepting or rejecting it. Over time, this would completely reshape their understanding of reality, making them see the world through Chanakya's lens rather than their own. This technique is so dangerous because the person being influenced doesn't realize it's happening. They genuinely believe they're forming their own independent opinions based on objective reality, when in fact their entire information environment has been carefully engineered. In the modern world, this technique is used extensively by political movements, media organizations, cult leaders, and anyone who wants to create devoted followers rather than just temporary compliance. Now you might be wondering why Chanakya kept these techniques secret, why he never fully explained them in his writings, and why I'm calling them forbidden knowledge. The answer is both simple and terrifying. These techniques work so well that they can be used to control and manipulate people on a massive scale, potentially destroying free will and individual autonomy. Chanakya understood that knowledge is power, and that these particular forms of knowledge could corrupt those who use them while enslaving those they were used against. He saw himself as a guardian of this knowledge, using it only when necessary to protect and build his empire, but never sharing it completely because he knew it could be misused by others. In his later writings, Chanakya hinted at the existence of these techniques, but he coded them in metaphor, allegory, and indirect language that only the most dedicated students would be able to decipher. He believed that only those who had already developed wisdom, compassion, and strong moral character should have access to such powerful psychological tools. This raises important ethical questions about the use of psychological influence in the modern world. These techniques can be used to help people overcome limiting beliefs, achieve their goals, and create positive change in their lives, but they can also be used to exploit, manipulate, and control others for selfish purposes. The choice of how to use this knowledge is yours, but remember that Chanakya himself emphasized that true power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering yourself. The greatest leaders throughout history have been those who use their understanding of human psychology to inspire, empower, and elevate others, rather than to dominate and exploit them. As we reach the end of this deep dive into Chanakya's forbidden knowledge, I want to leave you with his most important teaching, which is that the ultimate goal of understanding human behavior should be to create a better world for everyone, not just to gain advantage over others. Chanakya believed that those who possessed great knowledge had a responsibility to use it wisely and with compassion for the greater good of humanity. These 7 forbidden secrets represent some of the most powerful psychological principles ever discovered, and they continue to shape human behavior and social dynamics in the modern world. Whether you use them to become a more effective leader, communicator, or simply to better understand the people around you, the choice is yours. But remember that with great power comes great responsibility, and that true wisdom lies not in controlling others, but in understanding yourself. If this exploration of ancient psychological wisdom has opened your mind to new possibilities, make sure to subscribe to our channel because we dive deep into the hidden knowledge of history's greatest strategic minds every week. Leave a comment below and let me know which of these 7 forbidden secrets surprised you the most, and how you plan to apply this knowledge in your own life. Remember that knowledge without action is worthless, so choose one technique that resonated with you and start observing how it plays out in your daily interactions with others. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the forbidden knowledge that Chanakya died protecting, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore even more dangerous psychological secrets that have been hidden throughout history.